this plane here. And in fact, where we landed Philae originally, the matte region, you can see a before and after shot. We see the dents in the surface. We think we excavated about 150 kilograms of material through this bounce. These are about 1 metre or so across and 10 or so centimetres deep. We've got an idea that it's a few tens of centimetres and then maybe there's some harder subsurface below. And so from far away, this dust layer looks fine and powdery, but when you drop closer from the Philae landing, this is the ROLIS camera, you can see that there's much more structure when you get closer. So it's not as fine-grained, it's an intimate mix of different scale structures. And that even on this rock as well, this called rock, it's not a rock, this block of material, there's fracturing and all kinds of things there as well. All this is still being considered and looked into. Right, this is the Imatec region on the belly of the duck. We've got these large planes of dust, but also these rounded features and layers. You see these layers and stratifications. We make comparisons with other comets we've been to. So this is the key thing. With the Rosetta data, we can compare to other observations and broaden our understanding of comets by knowing in depth what we know about Rosetta and applying it to other comets. So this is Temple 1. We see these conduit-like features. From Wild, we see these large expanses, these plateau regions as well, and then Hartley, here, this is our comet, and then Hartley, you see this bilobed, it looks more like a bowling pin, and our duck is not an uncommon feature of comets to have this bilobed feature. But again, showing that with our snapshots of other comets, we've seen similar things. We can study in depth with Rosetta and apply our understanding from Rosetta to other comets to broaden the implications of our Rosetta results. So what about the shape of the comet? We can look at these ubiquitous features, these layers and planes that I mentioned briefly. And you can map them out and get an idea of their orientation all over the comet. And the best way for me to describe this is like an onion, the layers of an onion. We're talking about whether the duck shape could have been formed from one comet that was then eaten away through activity, or two comets that have collided. So consider it to have, like, you're either a Spanish onion or two small non-Spanish onions that have collided. And so if you go home and eat the Spanish onion and try and carve it out to make it look like a duck, or you stick two smaller onions together, you'll get different orientations of the layers in those onions. And when you look at the layers, now let's go to the comet, when you look at the layers of the comet, you can look at the orientation of these layers. This is what this hedgehog plot is showing here. Based on all of the orientation of these layers here, the answer basically is that it can only be, these layers are oriented to describe two separate entities that have collided. You can't get this orientation from something that's been eaten away. And we think we got this from two smaller cometesimals that were in a low velocity collision many years ago. We can look at the activity, how that evolves. This is early on in the mission. This is again one of those Mercator plots. The yellow line is kind of the subsolar region, it's the point that's getting the most illumination. The blue dots are where we're seeing these jets of material, they're the foot points of these jets. So September, then we go to November. Here we see more of the blue dots, so more foot points, more activity. The sun's getting closer, further down. Then to April in 2015, much more activity. And we're looking at these foot points and examining what is driving that activity. This explosive activity that we're seeing, this expulsion of dust and gas. And we think they're driven by, there are pit regions which look like sinkholes on the Earth. So where we think we have subsurface volatiles, ice, that sublimates and causes a void to be formed, and then the surface falls down and causes this sinkhole-like structure. And then that continues to evolve through the sidewalls of this structure being eaten away. We also see a similar thing on cliff faces on the comet, this kind of thing. So you have the cliff face, it starts to thermally get stressed, and we have emission of further sublimation, and then the cliff starts to collapse, and we see evidence of that. Here, a before and after shot of the same cliff. This is directly you're looking directly down on the surface of the comet. You can see the foot of the cliff here on the top, and you see this slumping here, and then there's detritus at the bottom of the cliff face. We also see evidence at the bottom of these cliffs. See an image here. When we look at different filters, this blue stuff is ice. So we're seeing evidence of newly deposited ice. When this cliff collapses, sometimes we get lots of ice, and sometimes we get explosive outbursts driven by this. And this happened earlier this year. We had a massive outburst of material that we can trace the foot point close to one of these cliff areas, where we think it's driven by thermal stresses. This about to break down or about to destabilise cliff comes into sunlight and explosively collapses and emits all of this material. There's some other funky stuff going on. This is a demonstration of the effect of the dust layers that we see in some parts of the comet. What we're seeing here, if we zoom in, you see these jets that are coming from unilluminated parts of the comet. This is the effect, the thermal inertia effect of the dust layers. So the dust layer is like a blanket. It keeps high temperature below the in the subsurface. So when the surface goes into night, that gets cold, but the subsurface retains some heat and can continue sublimating. So that's why we get this continued sublimation and continued jets in as we go into sunset. We also see this diurnal activity that is driven by this effect. What you're seeing is a region in the neck here over time. This is subsequent orbits or subsequent rotations. What we're seeing here on the edge of the shadow is ice. That is caused by a replenishment of ice on the surface. It's a bit like a frost layer forming every time the comet rotates. So the comet is sublimating, the surface is emitting from the subsurface gas. As that surface goes into night, into darkness, is not illuminated anymore, the surface is immediately gets very cold. So material delivered to that freezes. The subsurface retains activity because it's got a bit of thermal inertia, it keeps warm, carries on feeding gas to the surface, which subsequently freezes. When it comes back round again into the morning, it's got a replenishment of ice on the surface. So we're seeing this daily cycle of ice on the surface. We also see an evolution in general of the surface throwing off a dust layer and becoming more icy. And that's what we see here in August. The red, basically, this is the spectra of the radiation, is more red because it's dusty. The blue indicates a more ice-like and bright surface. So we've thrown off the dust layer during perihelion, so during closest approach to the sun in August last year. And actually what's not shown here is subsequently, as the comet's now moved away from the sun, is becoming redder again. So the dust is coming and laying back on the comet. We see an evolution of features on the surface themselves. So this is evolution of a surface feature within the immatent region on the belly of the duck. We've got different angles so you don't see it as well, but you can see generally an evolution of this area. There's different stuff appearing at different times. When we look in different filters at different wavelengths, we see actually bright patches which we think are ice related, so this is driven by ice, but if we just took a normal bit of water ice and let it sublimate under these temperatures, it would take ages to sublimate. The evolution of these features are much faster than that, so we have to think about what kinds of ice are being sublimated to drive these features. This is ongoing study. This is a big plot of loads of stuff. It's all the data that we've got in terms of water production during the comet's orbit around the sun. So as it got close and then far away. All I'm showing here is the fact that we've matched ground-based observations with all the data on the spacecraft to get this plot and to show you how much stuff was kicking off. There's tons of materials coming off per day during August last year. So the comet was producing a lot of material. One of the problems with flying around a comet is that it's chucking stuff at you all the time. And then the invisible. This is a graphic of how the solar wind, the outer atmosphere of the sun, interacts with the comet. In fact, there's a point in which the gas that comes off the comet stops the solar wind from getting anywhere near the comet, and it forms this cavity. It's a bit similar to the one we have on Earth, but this one has no magnetic field in it. So the solar wind has a magnetic field which is stopped from getting anywhere near the comet. We thought we'd get close to the comet, but because of the star tracker issues, we had to move further away from the comet during perihelion. We thought we'd never get this measurement, but the comet showed us something else, that this region is very dynamic. So actually we thought this region would only be within about 10 to 40 kilometers from the nucleus. It came out to about 200 kilometers. So it came out to us. We were very surprised. It showed that this region is very dynamic. Now you can take the magnetic field of the solar wind and sonify it, make it into sound to give you an indication of how activity grows and how this interaction changes. And you can actually hear the growth of these diamagnetic cavities in the sea. So this is basically the data here. Magnetic field may sexy apparently. But anyway, so you've got the whole mission here. This is the baby comet in activity, and you'll hear the noise of the magnetic field growing, the noise of the waves caused by the interaction of the solar wind with the comet, and then when it gets to adult, you'll hear some other stuff. So this is the comet's growing in activity. The noise becomes more sporadic in some time when it becomes a teenager in a minute. So it's a nice little baby. It's reasonably behaved. Well, it depends what the baby's like. But anyway. So this is the disruptive teenager that's going all over the place. And then you'll move into a more adult, weird Lego-looking person in a minute. And you'll hear the diamagnetic cavity coming, and the noise disappears in there. But let's wait for the lady to come to begin with there. So that's the diamagnetic cavity sonified, that drop out of the magnetic field. Anyway, that's one way of showing plasma. It's difficult to make it sound interesting. Anyway, I digress. The comet on different scales, this is what we're showing here. We've got an intimate picture of the comet at very different scales. We've got it at the large scales here and the small scale. So we're going from nanometer, in fact, even smaller than that. So we go from nanometer scale. The Midas instrument has actually shown fractal nature in some of these dust particles, that we can't actually resolve the smaller scale of these dust particles. Then we go to Cosima, we see these boulder piles, then the larger scale out to the size of the comet at 4.1. Then you expand that to the ground-based observations we have at the same time, showing the tail of the comet out to 2 million kilometres in December last year, out to something like 10 or 20 kilometres earlier this year. And for reference, that's the size of the moon in the sky if you could see the comet. The comet's very faint, so you couldn't see it with the naked eye, but that's to give you an idea of how big the tail is. We also had an active amateur observing campaign. So amateurs have a better control of when they can point their telescope. So we've got lots of fantastic data that we're going to put in the archive alongside the Rosetta data itself. So this is the end of the mission now. This is the end of mission orbits. We were getting closer and closer. We tried to get as close as possible, but in early September, we actually were getting problems with sticking to the orbit we planned. We had to keep a 3-day orbit period because all of our observations are pre-planned. So we had to make sure we stuck to a 3-day period, otherwise our observations would be completely out of sync, and that was one of the problems I'll show in a minute. And then, of course, we did a special dogleg manoeuvre, and then we plummeted to our death on the 30th of September. Some of you might be familiar with Bill Nye and Emily Lakdawala. They showed us, gave an indication of perhaps what the situation would be on the day in September. And then myself and Patrick, we were at a meeting in California recently, and we reenacted it, although Patrick was much more violent in his impact. I think he was trying to accurately portray the impact speed. Right, what about this fella before I get into the intermission? Maybe it was these guys. No. So we had this constant measurement of that could probe the internal makeup of the comet, but we could use it to triangulate the signal of the lander. We had a rough idea within tens of meters of where the lander was. The problem was the lander to be observed, it was difficult. We never got close enough to get a really good image, and the surface of the comet was similar to the colour of the lander, and also there were these features, these fracture features, which are the same size as the lander as well. So there was lots of stuff that looked like the lander. This is the problem we had. This was the best image we had of this region, which was in that concert area. However, if I said, yeah, that's definitely the lander, you'd all go, no, it's not. We needed to get close to get a good image of the lander to say this is unambiguous that this is the lander. So these are some of the shots we were taking in August and September last year. Those perturbations due to the weird gravity when we were getting close is the problem here. That red dot is supposed to be in the middle. So this whole frame is supposed to be centered on that red dot. So the issue of the gravity perturbing the orbit and us having to correct it meant that we were off pointed by nearly 2 degrees. Or it was out of sync. It wasn't off pointing, it was just that we were taking the images at a different time. 20 minutes later, we could actually get an indication that there was something there. You could see something waving at us over this bump. Now, remember, this is where we wanted to aim. The next orbit, we got it in the frame. Again, this bit here, nearly. This bit here is supposed to be in the centre, but that was the phone call I received at 11:30 at night to look at my phone and see this, that is unambiguous, and it's nice on this projection, that we had the lander. There's no argument that that's a lander, unless there was more than one lander, which there isn't. There's no conspiracy theory for you to go away with. Yeah, so you can pick out things. This is the graphic showing the panoramic shot we took when Philae landed. You can pick out parts of the Philae images and invert them. You can see this leg is that one. This is the C4 and the C3 camera. So this is this stuff here. You can actually see the head of the camera. You can see the concert antenna. You can see the head of the drill. And this is all being investigated now by the lander team. Right, landing, Rosetta, the end of mission. We were landing in the map region. You can see up here, there was a sequence of 3 pits that's shown here as well. And we were aiming near this big pit, which we named Deir el Medina, after a pit in Egypt, which is full of the detritus of day-to-day living of the ancient Egyptians. They kind of had clay pots that they'd scratch stuff on, what they were doing, their shopping lists, and they'd throw them in this pit. And it was a nice analogy for us to say, well, that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to get a good feel of the day-to-day activity of the Comet. For me personally, I thought it looked more like this pit. And the only reason we landed right there was I was trying to find Boba Fett. So a couple of snippets from inside ESA now. So these are emails from the flight dynamics people. These are the people that predict or drove the spacecraft. They told us how the trajectory would go. They designed the trajectory around the Comet. This is the final report of the landing. This is where we are supposed to hit. And this is the email from Pablo saying, you know, we targeted within 20 minutes of getting the spacecraft down. We got within 20 odd seconds and within 33 meters of the target point. So they were happy to have had this toy to play with called Rosetta. Some fantastic work by them. So for reference, that's where we were targeting and we got there. That's pretty good shooting. From, I think, yeah, the descent, which was a ballistic trajectory, was something like 19 kilometers out, so it was quite good. Right, from Armel, we had daily reports from Rosetta. This was the last one. Loss of signal at this time. Last packet was generated on board, so the last data that was available was at this time, and with that timestamp. Then there was a Star Tracker event generated. So the Star Tracker was this thing that we had, because of the Star Tracker getting blinded by the dust, that's why we had to move away. It's always detecting things in its field of view, or stars as it's supposed to, but it had this particular event, which was that there was a large object in the field of view. So that was the last thing it saw before the end. Now this is the team in June when we were planning the end of mission in a meeting in Greenwich. So we were happy we'd got that far, that we'd achieved so much already, but then we were also sad. And I think you'll see that Fabrizio does the best, I think. So actually, I look at it, I judge the people in the team by how well they were doing in terms of smiling and not smiling. I went out afterwards, I'm like, come on, really? Anyway, so yeah, they were sad, but also happy that we'd achieved so much and that we were doing something so cool, or at least we thought. We had a big impact in the media. This is, well, we had Google Doodles, we had astronauts showing how easy it is to land on a comet. This has prompted awareness during November 14 of who knew what Rosetta was. And that's pretty high scores in terms of a science and technology activity. Of course, Germany won, like penalties. Monsieur Hollande has named his dog Philae, so it even got to him. Lots of fantastic coverage. Social media, but it's broader than science and technology. We had artistic, people were getting inspired by Rosetta in general. Vangelis, some of you may know, electronic composer, he's composed an entire album of music dedicated to Rosetta, and he's also a Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire thing. Fame. We had artists as well, graphic artists, being inspired to do more art, and this is what we had here. This is Katerina. She actually came to one of our meetings and showed her artwork. Her artwork is massive. It's 20 feet across and massive landscapes of the comet. This chap as well was inspired. Some of you may know who he is. He's from a band called Queen. He does a lot of imagery and is interested in stereographic imaging. He did a PhD in zodiacal dust, so has an affinity to this kind of thing, and in fact gave us a good luck message at the end of mission.
Hi Rosetta folks, this is Brian May speaking to you from Bangkok. Just wanted to congratulate you on the most amazing cometary encounter of all time. And congratulations especially on the climax which happens tonight. I'll be on stage in Bangkok, but you will be in my thoughts. God bless you. God bless you, Rosetta.
I thought that was a crap excuse not to come to the end of the mission. Music inspiration is quite broad. We've got this chap here, Colin Pillinger of Beagle fame. He was great at public interaction and public outreach. So much so that he was contacted by the guitarist from Napalm Death, a Birmingham/New York grindcore band, who were very interested in Mars and science. And I more recently met the lead singer as well. And sometimes you go to a concert and people dedicate things to members of the audience. So this is Napalm Death on a boat in the Thames.
This one's for all the scientists in the audience. Thank you, good night.
Right, we're nearly over now. Okay. So it's wide-ranging, the impact of Rosetta. However, we've only just started scraping the surface. When, on 30th of September, I was there at the end, and there were very mixed emotions. I had particular emotions, I have to say, on the day. And I was approached by Eberhard Grun, who's one of the grandfathers of the mission. He was there during Giotto days, was one of the originators of Rosetta, and he came up to me with a beaming face. He just said, "Matt," and he grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "Matt, this is the equivalent to 1799 when they retrieved the Rosetta Stone." We won't go into whether it was the French or the British, but that's where we are. We've just got the stone. We now have the 20-odd years, like they did when they tried to decipher the Rosetta Stone, to crack the code. So we've got that time now to do it. That's what we have to do. We have to investigate the data, and we've got a lot of time to do it. And the thing is, we have really just scratched the surface. About 5% of the data some of the teams are saying they've actually analysed. There's so much more to do. And the important thing we do now, even though the operations are over, we're trying to make sure the data is in the best quality, so we archive it so that everyone can use it. And the teams themselves have been so busy in this intense operational period that now they can relax a little bit and look into the data. So that's where we are. We're only just beginning to put the puzzle that is Rosetta together. Right, so I'm going to end with this. It will take some time. I tried to encapsulate feelings associated with the end of mission, and this was the best way I could do it, kind of mixing some of the stuff that happened. And hopefully you've all seen Blade Runner, otherwise this is going to spoil the end of the film, but anyway.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
Okay, so we have alloys. Somebody. I copy. And go ahead with the next step. All stations on the briefing room, we just have had a loss of signal at the expected time. This is another outstanding performance from flight dynamics. So we'll be listening for the signal from Rosetta for another 24 hours, but we don't expect any. And so this is the end of the Rosetta mission. Thank you and goodbye.
I can announce the full success of this historic descent of Rosetta towards 67P, and I declare hereby the mission operations ended for Rosetta. the Rosetta stone was originally located in Sais, and we shall name the impact point as such, so that we can finally say